When is the answer?
Could we have Councillor Rain?
The second round starts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Cabinet. I speak on this evening on behalf of business management overview and scrutiny, and also with the permission of Councillor Finn on the part of budget and performance. I'll be very brief in summarising my feeling, having shared that we deal first with business management, and in particular where we dealt with this Lock Bombarded petition. There seemed a great frustration, and there is tonight a great frustration, about the lack of knowledge of the contract and lack of consultation, apparent consultation of the contract. And I think this is what is giving rise to a lot of frustration amongst the gallery this evening, that they don't know enough about the contract and enough about what is going on. We were given a number, when we discussed it at business management, we were given a number of assurances by Mr. Travers in a very lengthy and detailed answers. And where I could, I checked this with the contract and was reassured. However, the contract is a little bit like scriptures. If it depends really who's reading it as to what you get out of it. If you go in with an open mind and say, this is a good contract, then you will, having read it, decide that it is a good contract. If you go into it with a closed mind and say, this is a terrible contract, then you can find evidence in there of pitfalls, potential pitfalls. And this is a frustration with such a large document. We then move on to the budget and performance. The main things in the budget and performance were the concerns about the transition period for the staff. And we ask, in budget and performance, we ask that the Cabinet take great concern about making provisions for staff if they are made redundant or they have to move or whatever. Please take great care to make sure that there is sufficient finance to help and sufficient support to help the staff. And that, in summary, without going on at any length, is the summary of the scrutiny concerns. And I'm sure scrutiny will have another go at it on the 13th of December if the decision goes ahead tonight and if the opposition do by chance call it in, which is, we're not sure yet.
Thank you, Councillor Rayner. Actually, I had it noted here that there were 4 recommendations from the committee. I'm happy to confirm that, of course, we will help staff in any move that they make. There's also another suggestion that would the scrutiny committee be able to call the provider in to be scrutinised, and the answer to that is yes as well. There was a suggestion that there should be proper resources to mitigate against potential employment liabilities. I'm happy to confirm that as well. And the other question was the establishment of a dedicated scrutiny committee to monitor this contract. I will be bringing forward proposals to set up a committee to supervise the contracts. Yes.
Thank you very much indeed.
Does anyone else have any questions for Councillor Rayner? Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Moore.
I hope I can be heard properly. These microphones are a bit of devil. Tonight, you are faced with making an extremely serious decision about the future of critical council services that affects quite literally every single person in the borough. I believe it will fundamentally change the way our council is run and how our services are delivered. You may argue that who delivers council services is of no interest to ordinary residents, but I genuinely do not believe that that's the case. Your plans to outsource both customer care and so-called back office functions, along with planning and regulatory services next month, is a hugely risky gamble that is genuinely unprecedented in size and scope. And yet, there has been absolutely no meaningful consultation with local people. The proposals are a fundamental change to the democratic control that both councillors and local residents have over what they see as their local services. Residents and councillors will not have the same access to information because of commercial sensitivity, and this has been a problem elsewhere. The proposed contract is fixed for 10 years at least, and there is no possibility of exiting the arrangement without paying a hefty financial penalty, unless, of course, things go badly wrong. It will run over the next 2 and possibly 3 electoral cycles. Local residents will be able to vote you out, but that's profoundly undemocratic. It is genuinely an end to local democracy as we know and understand it at the moment. I do not think there's anyone in this room who doesn't understand that the council's funding has been dramatically cut by the Conservative-led coalition government, and that savings must be found, and it is a tough set of decisions. But the fact is, we simply do not know that the proposal before you tonight is the best value option, because no public sector comparator, and I know there's debate around that, but may I phrase it differently, is proper comparative assessment with the in-house services has been done, and members around the table would know that this is not a jolly-come-lately comment. I've raised this several times in scrutiny. We are told that Capita is guaranteeing £120 million of savings over the lifetime of the contract, but the reality is there is no such thing as guaranteed saving. The experience of other councils, such as Liverpool, Somerset, Bournemouth, Sefton and Swansea, all show that savings targets proposed by contractors are not always credible or always achieved. At the Barnett Alliance question time, the leader stated that the contract was 8,000 pages long and no one would be reading it. I'd ask each of you whether you have indeed looked at the contract and what is proposed within it. And whether you've considered, whether you've satisfied yourself that this really is the best deal for Barnet's residents, and that's each of you around the table, because you are all taking that decision. I've spent around 5 hours so far looking through the detailed clauses. That's really only time to skim the surface, and I still have some questions to answer for myself. Other of my colleagues have done the same. So if each of you have not looked at the contract, and I don't mean just for the half hour before tonight's meeting, I would question how you can have made up your own minds about the proposal. About it by external consultants who will not genuinely be around once the contract is signed. I mean, I'll have to say I thank the officers who have been helpful with the contracts, and I have no doubts about the support we've had in that. Bear in mind that other councils who have had to terminate contracts and bring services back in-house at an extra cost will have taken assurances from their advisors that everything was in order and the savings were credible. And they subsequently found that this simply was not the case. Didn't turn out to be the case. So, unless Barnet has learned the lessons from these councils where things have gone wrong, and that's been a bone of contention in 2 scrutiny committees so far, how can we be sure that things will not go wrong here? I've asked whether any of these councils have been visited and contacted by Barnet, and have not yet received a satisfactory answer on that. Now, I've spoken to both councillors in power and those in opposition in some of these councils, and I've heard them express their concerns about their experience of this type of outsourcing and its impact on local people. You say that these services are not public-facing, but I have to say, I don't see that there's anything more public-facing than customer care or indeed council tax collection. It will have a significant impact on real people's lives. You only need to look at what happened a number of years ago in council tax and benefits collection when the computer system was a problem. Those are real people, including the elderly, the disabled and the vulnerable, people for whom we collectively have a duty of care. And I have particular concerns about this group of people as the proposals are predicated on a shift to new media and communication channels, email, the internet. What will be the impact of those who do not own a computer, or who lack the skills or the inclination to use them? My 82-year-old mother has never got to come to terms with computers. I would end by saying that you do not, she's not living in the borough, I would end by saying that you do not have to vote on for this proposal this evening. You can still ask officers to come back and look at alternative ways of making savings. And This is a huge amount of money. It's services tied up for 10 years. If any of you have the slightest doubt about the proposals before you, I would urge you to reject the recommendation tonight and to do just that.
Absolutely.
A list of things not unexpectedly to respond to you on, but I wonder whether members have questions that they would like to ask Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Councillor. As someone like yourself who's looked at the contract in some detail, are you aware that in the contract it quite clearly states that in regard to your concerns over the shift to the new media, that face-to-face services will stay the same? It's guaranteed that they'll stay the same, if not be improved.
I've read some of those sections, and clearly that is the proof of the pudding will be as that works out. I know that some of the customer care services will stay in the borough, particularly those relating to adult social care. But clearly your savings will become sensitive around those. So clearly that's one of the things we'll need to scrutinise and challenge and watch should you proceed with this.
So can I ask you to draw your audience in your speech? Because in my view, you're just scaremongering.
I'm not scared. I fully accept that there are elements of that that's been looked at, but one of the challenges is you are looking progressively at a shift. A lot of the savings will be predicated on that being cheaper, and there will be some challenges as costs tighten, as things become challenging. You will look to find ways of paring down on services, and I am just concerned to make sure that we absolutely do protect those face-to-face services for those most vulnerable residents.
Thank you. Councillor Moore, you mentioned earlier about the computer failure in council tax collection. Now, when that happened, that was an in-house service. So how can you say that if we kept the services in-house, that gives us a greater guarantee that there won't be any problems? And would you not say having a contract with all these clauses, and all these safeguards, all these legal remedies, isn't that taking greater control of these services than we currently have?
The point I was making about that was merely an illustration of the very significant impact, and I don't know whether you had housing benefit cases, people who were on the verge of and close to and actually were evicted during that period, and there were some real problems around it. And I was using that as an illustration of the real impact on ordinary people's lives. In terms of, I would trust if it were retained in-house, that we'd be investing in the same sort of change to IT and maintaining the same service, because we would be wanting to balance that. You'd be wanting to improve those services. You would have to deliver a proper service. Now, I know that you're going to say to me, where are you going to get that investment? I could be very flippant and say, well, actually, some of the contracts that have not gone well over the last few years have cost us quite a lot in capital investment that could have been put into those.
So I welcome your conversion. You said in your speech the savings must be found, but do you believe that borrowing money is the way to make these savings?
That could potentially be invested. You could not have. I'm not suggesting those are easy sums to put together. They would be considered very seriously if you're putting together an investment programme. But frankly, you have now got the money back from your Iceland deposits. There is, and I'm not saying you're swilling around with money, life is tough and there are some tough decisions, but should you wish to make that decision, to put money in and invest and improve those services in-house, you could do that.
Made it very, very clear what your party's policy is. He said on a £13.5 million investment that Capita providing, why we're doing that, we should borrow that money. That's £41 each per person.
I was making, and Councillor Shadman is entitled to make his comments, and there's a perfectly rational argument for investing to say, borrowing and investing to say, should you wish to do so. But that wasn't the point I was making. There are ways of making sensible investment decisions to improve your local services. I don't mean to be flippant when I say I've been a cabinet member before, and there were tough decisions to make about investment in IT at that point as well. I'm not naive about that, but there are grown-up decisions you could make differently.
pot of £13 million is sitting in the council coffers where we could invest. And all of our reserves are either earmarked or they're there to cover specific risks, or they're to cover specific capital investments such as new schools. So could Councillor Moore, as the leader of the opposition group, who is saying to people about it, you know, that they would like to run the council services in a couple of years' time, could she tell us where that £13.5 million would come from specifically?
I don't have access to all of the details that you, as the Cabinet Member for Resources,
I would
have.
like the Section 151 officer, Andy, to clarify that Councillor Moore does have access to all information regarding reserves.
No, we don't. You keep it from us.
I would therefore like Councillor Moore to take that back.
I could be flippant and say 6.5 million under the category of other is not great detail. But the point I'm making is...
Sorry, Councillor Moore, are you making a suggestion about the Section 151 officers?
Not at all.
Sorry, I think you're on dangerous ground.
Let me rephrase that. I have had a list of those, and there is a category, it's a bit like a miscellaneous category. It was in no way impugning the Section 151 officer, and I don't think you took it that way.
I would like to just respond to some of the points you made. The services that are being outsourced under these two proposed contracts, and particularly the one that we're deciding tonight, are not in the main front-facing. They are back office tasks, human resources, finance, so on and so forth. They are not things that people would usually wish to go and see somewhere. There is no difficulty with these services at all going outside. People well know that others provide these services, maybe not in the same scale, but each of them is a discrete service that is provided by others for other councils. It is not a gamble. This is a careful gamble. It has taken some years over developing. This is not a quick fix. This is something that has been thought about a long time. Well, thank you very much, madam. There is no change in democratic control. The elected representatives at all times remain firmly in charge. And exit is possible, but I would remind you, you would only want to exit if the scheme were not a success. So really your point is not germane, in that I believe it will be a success. Once again tonight, you have not made any suggestion of savings that can be made. If one were to reject these proposals, we would have to come up with a lot of savings which will be very hard to find and very unpleasant. For many, many years we've had Newcastle Council based around as an example to us, and yet look at the redundancies they've had to make and the savage cuts in libraries that they have to do.
This doesn't work at all.
Now, you also questioned the length of the contract and whether members have looked at it. Now, Councillor Gordon came up with an excellent answer to that point. Many of you will know that he is a solicitor specialising in contracts, and he said he made, well, a house purchase is usually people's most important purchase in their life. And when one buys a house, one relies on the solicitor's competence to look at that contract and point out the things. And we are compelled to do the same. And we've heard from tonight that Flowers have said that they have not had a failure in this respect. I'm very pleased to hear that answer.
You're only fooling yourself.
So I'm just one of my response to your questions, and perhaps we can now move on. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I will just point out one thing in the context of front-facing. I think everyone around the table should just, and I'm sure you will be aware, but actually these are fundamental services that underpin a whole set of front-facing services on which the council and local people rely.
Thank you for that. And now, moving forward, we have the...
Why can't you just beat the game?
We have this proposal, thank you Mr. Sam, we have this proposal here before us tonight to consider and to consider carefully. Everyone here will have read these documents that we have. There are points that people wish to raise. I just want to point out that the savings that are featured in here are the equivalent to the construction of 12 schools. They are a considerable sum. Sometimes it helps to put it in perspective to have something concrete in front of us. It is an enormous saving, and I believe this is one that we should take. We do have a problem finding the cash to invest in computer systems and computers that would undoubtedly be needed within the council. This is not something we have the cash allocated for, and we do not have the reserves with which to purchase them. Councillor Moore made a comment regarding Icelandic deposits that have been returned or are being returned. Now, of course, those deposits were earmarked before they went away to Iceland, and they have come back and they will be dealt with the purpose that they were borrowed in the first place. Councillor Thomas, would you like to say anything about the report?
The councillors around this table this evening, certainly by myself and colleagues, this is a joint report with Councillor Rams. We take this decision tonight in knowing that these services affect residents. But we believe that residents will benefit from this. We firmly believe that, Leader, otherwise we would not do it. And let's face it, Leader, we are elected councillors, and we want to be elected again. And we would not do. And somebody just said we won't be elected for much longer, and that's how important we feel this is. We really do feel that this will benefit. We want this to succeed. We want this to succeed, and if we don't think it would succeed, we would kick it out. We would kick it out. Now, Leader, we've gone through the due process, external and internal audit, we've had involvement in the One Barley programme. They've given us assurance that all governance and controls have been met. And Leader, I can't continue with, I think,
I suggest that you don't continue like this. Shouting down the democratic meeting is hardly conducive to common good.
We disapprove of this meeting.
Few years.
gallery. I am now being asked to call the police. I do not wish to do so. I do not wish to call the police. Please, will you stop?